Hi, I'm Amelie Abass and I'm here at MVM headquarters talking to Harvey Jones, the chair of the Young Liberals. So just want to say thank you so much for being here today. What are the Young Liberals, first of all?
So the Young Liberals are the youth wing of the Liberal Democrats. We have members right across the United Kingdom. We work at a number of levels, working with our MPs to get policy motions passed, working with young councillors, training members to stand for election, training members to get involved in politics at all levels. We run campaigns, we run events, and we represent the interests of young people at the heart of the Liberal Democrats. And now that we're the third party in the House of Commons again, that comes with a lot more responsibility. So for us, there's a big chance to put youth issues and the things that matter to young people firmly on the political agenda.
That's really great to hear. I mean, some of you viewing might know that I personally am a member of the Green Party, and I'm quite active within the Young Greens. And I think it's so cool, really, how both of our parties, the Green Party and the Lib Dems, they kind of place an importance on the voice of their young members. And another thing that I think is really cool is that, proportional representation, which is what Make Votes Matter wants to bring into the House of Commons, it has the ability to bring on cross-party collaboration, just like this. We don't have to have the same views on everything to collaborate on one particular issue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, for me, I kind of got into politics, I got pregnant and I wanted to see the world a better place for people that are struggling, and the country a better place for people that are struggling. So, kind of, what drew you into the political sphere?
So for me, it's more about getting people elected that have the same views and the same values that I do. So people that believe in a fairer economy, a fairer society, tackling climate change, all of these big issues. For me, I was originally a member of the Labour Party. I left the Labour
That's
Party.
interesting.
Yeah, I left the Labour Party in 2018 and joined the Lib Dems pretty soon after. Mainly, I think, because Labour were big in my hometown in South Wales, so they were the obvious challenges for, against the government. So my first election was 2017. That was the first time I voted. So at that time, there was, the big buzz around Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party, challenging what the Tories were doing. So that sort of drew me in. That sort of feeling that you can make a stand and really have an impact just by voting, just by sharing, delivering some leaflets, sharing the messages of a party online, and actually just sort of trying to take that message to more people and trying to share that vision for a better country.
Yeah, no, and that's really powerful. And I think that it's a testament to PR, as in proportional representation, to just kind of bring youth voices together and just really say that actually we do want a voice, right? Yeah. So, as an ambassador for Young Make Votes Matter, the youth division for Make Votes Matter, my primary focus is campaigning for proportional representation in the UK. However, I also emphasise the crucial role in youth engagement in politics. It's not about voting for a specific party, but it's about the power of your voice in shaping the future. For you, Harvey, is it more essential that young people vote or that young people vote Lib Dem?
That is a fantastic question. I think, for me, I would say they should vote Liberal Democrat. I'm sure you'd have a different opinion. But I think that there are two separate things. The first one is that political parties should engage with young people and should share the messages that matter to young people on things like housing, on things like mental health, the state of education, all of these sorts of things. But actually, when it comes to it, I would encourage anyone to just vote, because if we look at what happened at the last election, there were so many places where candidates won with less than 35% of the vote, some less than 30% of the vote. And if you look at how low turnout was, just a few extra people could have flipped quite a lot of constituencies a completely different way.
Yeah.
And if you're a young person that's unhappy with the way that things are going, or you just want to sort of make your voice heard and say, I believe in this person or this party, that is one of the most crucial things that you can do, because even if you vote for a party that doesn't have that many seats, your member of parliament may be looking at the parties that did better and wondering, why did people vote that way? What are the issues that matter to those voters? So put your voice on the record, vote for a party that you believe in, or even just an independent candidate. Even just spoiling a ballot is a valid thing to do, rather than just staying at home and not using the right that you have.
Absolutely.
But again, I would say they should vote Liberal. just to keep on message and make sure that I don't get thrown out of office.
Absolutely. So just touching on education, I think we see a more educational divide amongst voters. People with degrees are likelier to vote. However, I think we can bridge this gap by ensuring that everyone feels represented in politics regardless of their academic background, right? What can we do to bridge the educational gap and ensure politics represents everyone?
I think representation is obviously one of the most important things, and that comes back to what parties can do. What we're doing in the Young Liberals at the moment is quite a lot of work on diversity and inclusion, and looking at groups of people within the party that we struggle to engage with or that don't feel represented by what we do. For our conferences, which are a big part of the party experience, it's where members make policy. There are quite good access funds to help reduce the costs for those sorts of things and make it much more affordable for people. We also have hybrid conferences now, so people can join from home and vote online, which makes it a lot more accessible to people that maybe have irregular work patterns, or they're in an insecure job that they have to work a lot longer hours, or they don't feel they can take the time off to come to an event like that. And all those sorts of things will put people off. So I think breaking down those sorts of barriers is absolutely crucial. I would also just say, don't be afraid of the people that you represent. If you're a councillor or you're an MP or you're a candidate, make sure you contact as many people as possible in the ward or the constituency.
Can I just say that is so right. I think me, as one of my main things that I'm doing now within Make Votes Matter, is interviewing people. And yeah, I've been lucky enough to get some yeses, but there have been, for every 5 yeses, there have been like about 50 to 100 no's, and you can't let that stop you. So absolutely don't, especially in politics, genuinely, like, as long as you're like the least bit respectful, they won't care if you reach out to them, and in fact they'll respect you more for reaching out, I think. So yeah, it's a really good point.
Absolutely. Canvassing is still one of the things that we as a party put a lot of importance on and really help build up that reputation. I think for parties that have been traditionally smaller parties like the Greens and Liberal Democrats, building up those relationships is really, really important, because that builds the trust and it makes people think that actually you do listen to them, and that then reaches out into the things like how we make politics more representative. If you actually listen to what people are thinking and what they're saying and what they believe in, you'll start talking about those issues and it brings more people in. So that is, to me, absolutely crucial. I mean, also I think political education has to be has to be critical. And I think the younger that we start talking to people, before 18, 16, even just telling people there are these, people that go and make laws that say what you can and can't do, say that to primary school kids, just let them know that there's this thing. And it builds that understanding, it builds the curiosity about politics, and as they get older then, they're a bit more open to those sorts of ideas. Yeah,
I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to get onto next. So, I mean, including the basics of politics, I think, would support youth engagement. But do you believe that you need to have studied politics to get involved? Or do you think a genuine interest is enough to kind of make the country a better place?
So I will say, straight off the bat, I have never studied politics.
Wow.
A-level, university, never. I'd studied German and medieval literature at university. I am not political in terms of what I've studied.
Yeah.
I just felt that the government is a bit naff, I want to see a change of government, I want to see people doing things for the community, I'm going to go out and say, vote for this party. I don't think you need to be, political in terms of what you study. You don't need to study politics or international relations or anything. And just because all the Conservative Prime Ministers, most of them have done PPE at Oxford, that does not mean that you need to go to Oxford and study politics if you want to make a difference.
But there's also a flip side to that. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people that have studied politics at A-level or undergraduate level, and then they go off to do something that has nothing to do with politics. I'm personally studying politics, and I want to go on to do some form of political journalism, but genuinely, I don't think it matters at all. So obviously that's, really powerful to hear. So, I mean, as we've touched upon, I think it's clear that the government, really must prioritise political education for all ages, I think. Obviously, political education for a 16-year-old would look very different for a political education for an 8-year-old. But it can be approached in ways, I believe, where you're getting used to it. So by the time you turn 18, voting is like a no-brainer. You think, oh, I've been exposed to this for 10 years, voting's a no-brainer. I think defining the word politics actually would make it a lot more accessible to the youth. So I have my own definition, but I want to hear yours first.
It's really difficult because ultimately politics is sort of everything that happens in society, in our communities.
Right, yeah.
And I remember I was quite political when I was in sixth form, probably really irritating to everyone around me. But there were lots of people that, when it came up to the 2017 general election, which was when we were in year 13, there were lots of people that just didn't care and think, oh, I'm not getting involved in that, I don't really care about politics. And you sort of think, well, you're in a state-funded secondary school, your parents, some of them may, some of your family may work for the NHS, they may work for, you've driven into school on a road that's full of potholes, it's unsafe for your younger sister or brother.
So you'd assume that it's in their best interest.
Yeah, and I think people don't realise actually how much of the world that we live in is just shaped by the decisions that we make at the ballot box every few years.
Absolutely.
And it's such a crucial thing to do. That's why this political education point is so important. Making it more accessible, I think, will make people realise that politics is sort of the foundation that our communities are built on, our communities function on. And if we don't keep, people's voices engaged and make sure that politics is representative, you're going to get the rise of, people that don't quite share that quite positive view for politics, I think.
Yeah. What would you say if I said that politics can be defined in 3 words?
I'll hear them. I'll try you.
So, my personal definition of politics is as simple as difference of opinion. And I think, obviously, you can delve in to the intricacies of politics, but a foundation in this country that everybody has is that everybody has opinions. And the way to voice them is through politics. So I think once people understand, oh, hang on, I've got an opinion on this, then it just makes you really think, wow, I should really be voting because I have opinions just the same as, the older gentleman next door who's been voting all his life. We all have opinions.
That's really good. I'm stealing that. That's fantastic.
So we heard it here first, people. It is my definition. Thank you very much. I actually got said an essay very, very recently, and the question in that essay was, what is politics? And at the time, I had no clue. And I'm quite sad about that now because I would have gotten a much better mark. But I now have my definition, so I'm just going to put a difference of opinion limited. So I claim that one. Okay, so on to proportional representation. I think that a lot of the reason why there isn't a whole load more support for a different electoral system, one in which every vote counts, is that most non-politically dedicated people, they won't know that there's a different way of doing things. How vital is proportional representation to you personally and to all the young people you know who are voting, but voting for no reason because of the current first-past-the-post system?
So, as a Liberal Democrat, I have to say I think PR is probably one of the things that keeps me up at night. Like a lot of us, you know, there are always arguments about whether it should be single transferable vote or, you know, mixed member representation or what system we should use. But actually, for me, it is absolutely critical that we change the way that people vote. I grew up in South Wales, and, you know, for a lot of my life, it was pretty much a one-party state for a lot of South Wales. It was Labour-dominated. My constituency, my home constituency of Bridgend, changed in 2019 to the Conservative Party. But when you only really see 2 or 3 parties represented on the national level, it shuts down a lot of conversations about alternative ideas. Like you were saying, people don't know that there's a different way of doing things, and it really makes it harder for those sorts of established parties and established opinions to be challenged, and challenged thoroughly, I would say, where people can actually debate them and argue with them. For me, it's absolutely critical that we stop having massive majority governments with a tiny share of the vote that do not represent the people that they represent, which is it seems like a silly thing to say, but when you've got a constituency that is won with 30% of the vote for one party and everyone else is on like 22, 23, how is that good politics?
It makes no sense.
Why shouldn't the other 4 parties also have a seat at the table if they also get that fair share of the vote across the country? It just puts people off, and it makes people question, well, I've always voted for this party or I've always voted for that party, but nothing really changes, and we keep going between the two of them. Why can't we vote for something different? I think if we had a different voting system which gave the other parties like Lib Dems, the Reform Party, you know, I don't like them at all, but you have to accept the fact that they got 14% the last election. And that 14% of people probably think, well, actually, what's the point now? I voted for them and nothing has happened, and I've still got a Labour MP or a Tory MP. So it's really, really crucial to help people understand that politics can work, and politics does work if people are given a chance. But until we get rid of a system that just makes it a two-way competition all the time, we're not going to get the real change. And I think that does probably feed into youth turnout. If they 100%. You know, a lot of people have voted for the first time in 2024, having just had Conservative-led governments, just like a lot of people in 2010 would have just had the Labour government. And I think if people don't feel that they can have an active voice, young people in particular, the first time they vote, then it will put them off.
And I also think that the system is definitely set up for failure, because, you know, we're all voting for this one party or the other. And then, like we saw last year, Labour comes into power, right? So then you've got approximately 64 million residents, all their issues and things they want to solve, they're all put on one party. So whatever job the Labour Party has done, good or bad, realistically, with the current system, they can't be expected to solve everything. That's why we have different parties, because different parties place an importance on different things. When you think about the one party that is thinking the most about the climate, you think about Greens, right? When you think about a party that is, you know, thinking more about economic benefit, you're thinking about another party, you know, whatever party works best for your personal economic benefit. So it is definitely a system that is set up for failure, and it's gobsmacking for me that every time there's all these people saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this one party hasn't solved all the problems of this country, when it's never going to happen. So yeah, I mean, another question on proportional representation. do you think that proportional representation is just about a change for the electoral system, or do you think it's going to have far-reaching implications for what the government prioritises?
I think it would have quite far-reaching consequences for how we do politics, for how we do things like budgets. In Wales and Scotland, there are proportional systems for the Senedd and the Scottish Parliament, and they have, except for once in Scotland, always produced minorities, and parties have to work together. Recently, the Liberal Democrats have got budget deals with the Labour Party in Wales and the SNP in Scotland, and have managed to get a lot of benefits for things like rural communities, certain healthcare projects, funding for education, all of the things that people vote for this party because they know that we stand up for X, Y or Z. That is then put onto the agenda really firmly in a system that is designed to create minority governments and not give one party the majority.
Yeah.
Particularly in Scotland in 1999, when the Labour Party were a massively urban party. There were some rural seats, but a lot of the Liberal Democrat base came from rural areas. And so you have a good mix there of a party that has a big base in an urban area being influenced by a rural area-based party that can say, well, actually, a community in the northeast of Scotland or in this rural part of Wales needs to do things a bit differently because of the way that the population is or how services work. And you don't always have those things considered if you're not having people that represent those areas sat around the table making decisions.
Yeah.
So until I think we change the voting system to stop giving massive majorities to parties with 33% of the vote, you're not going to accurately reflect the issues that matter to all communities right across the country.
Absolutely. And I think something else really interesting is that both of our parties obviously really champion the voices of the youth. And with proportional representation, both of our parties would grow significantly in the House of Commons. And I think people underestimate that once they've grown in that way, we would be able to boost the youth voice even more because we've already got that platform. And I think for me personally, as a Green Party member, it is so important for me to just let people know that they should vote. I'm not so big on trying to convince people to vote Green because everybody has their own opinion, right? If you don't want to vote Green, I'm not going to waste my time on trying to convince you because that's not what politics is there for. I think politics should be letting people know that their voice is represented. I actually have here a very interesting quote from the Journal of Parliamentary Affairs that was this was published in 1954 and it was written by Sir Winston Churchill. I never thought I'd be quoting Sir Winston Churchill on a podcast, but here we are. So Sir Winston Churchill here is basically telling the British public what the role of an MP is, okay? So first of all, I kind of, want to know from you what you think the role of an MP is.
So, a little secret, I actually work for an MP, and a lot of the stuff that MPs do nowadays, I think is probably very different to what Winston Churchill would have said. Obviously, the main thing that they probably should do is go to Parliament and scrutinise the legislation, ask questions about issues that matter to their constituents. A lot of what we also do now is, of course, casework and making sure that people that have issues with things like tax, welfare, immigration, all these sorts of issues have them solved. And if we can use our influence as a Member of Parliament to maybe advocate for that particular case in Parliament or talk to a minister about it, then we absolutely will. So it's about balancing that mix of the role they have as the community representative in Parliament and scrutinising legislation and making decisions about really important things. And then in recent years, I think that sort of community-focused, more activist style of MP has really grown and is actually quite a crucial part of what MPs do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything you've said there is very true. And I wanted to read this because it actually really interested me. So I'm just going to quote this. So, the first duty of a Member of Parliament is to do what he thinks in his faithful and disinterested judgment is right and necessary for the honour and safety of Great Britain. So that's act in national interest, right? Then he goes on to say, his second duty is to his constituents, of whom he is the representative but not the delegate, right? So second is duty to constituents. Then he goes on to say, it is only in the third place that his duty to the party organisation or programme takes rank. All these three loyalties should be observed, but there is no doubt of the order in which they stand under any healthy manifestation of democracy. So I read that and it really interested me because Winston Churchill, all those years ago in 1954, is basically saying that the MPs should prioritise their constituents over their duty to their political party. So that obviously sounds very, very obvious. However, it's interesting that I don't actually see a lot of MPs behaving in that way. A lot of MPs, I think, are thinking first about their party and then about their constituents, when in the reality of it is that you were elected by your constituents to represent them. And I think that says a lot towards, all the safe seats that there are all over the country, when MPs have just kind of given up and they just don't work anymore because it's almost like they know they're not going to get fired. And I think I'd actually personally never heard of that quote. I was just tinkering around online a couple of days ago and I found it. And, does that kind of shock you, what Winston Churchill said, or?
I wouldn't have thought that the duty to constituents part would have been that sort of prominent, really.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill was an MP for 5 different places, I think, in over 70 years. But also, I think that line about being a representative, not delegate, is quite interesting because obviously there are lots of things that you personally you're going to disagree with your constituents on.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really fine line to balance between making sure you vote in a way that reflects what the people that sent you to Parliament believe versus what you think is going to be the right way to govern a country, which is such a fascinating job. It's a really difficult job, and I wouldn't want to do it. Having seen it,
same, me too.
I think it's really, really intense, and balancing those priorities is really interesting. So to see it 70 years ago, that is it's quite interesting. I wouldn't have known.
Now getting on to circling back to why we're here, which is proportional representation. I think maybe some of the young people watching this are going to be, quite inspired to get involved with the campaign.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. So how can young people get involved with the campaign for proportional representation? Are young Liberals prepared to champion proportional representation as a system for all voices to be considered in the electoral process?
Absolutely. We
Amazing.
are squarely behind proportional representation and giving everyone an equal say at every election. It's been Liberal and Liberal Democrat policy for about 100 years. It's a really core feature of what the party believes, and we really want to see a change. Just before Christmas, one of the Liberal Democrat MPs, Sarah Olney, introduced a bill in Parliament that would require a proportional representation system for general elections. Being realistic, it's probably not going to happen this time, but seeing how many Labour MPs backed it and seeing it just about get over the line was absolutely fantastic to see for the first time a majority of MPs that voted in the House of Commons on this issue backed proportional representation. So that feels like a really important first step in having this conversation, and young people can be absolutely central to championing that, whether that is writing to your MP, whether that is joining Make Votes Matter for one of their events, whether that is sharing things online about how unfair the results of the last election were. You can do little things like that to just raise awareness of the fact that we have an incredibly unfair electoral system that does not benefit young people, that can be changed, and it can be changed if we do what we can to let people know that we're not going to stand for this shoddy, out-of-date system anymore.
Absolutely. And also I think a lot of people would say that our current system is just not democratic. What do you think is the biggest threat to democracy?
I think, and I'm going to sound a bit like a granddad, but the way that AI has come on so quickly in recent years, things like deepfakes, misinformation, all of it has happened at such rapid pace. When it can manipulate voices, there was that thing about leaked clips of Keir Starmer apparently at conference a couple of years ago that were completely fake.
Yeah.
And I think when you're going into elections that are going to be seeing more and more of social media, we need to be really careful and responsible about how we make sure we regulate without, wanting to limit freedom of speech or stop people sharing their opinions and having that difference of opinion.
Yeah.
But we really need to make sure that legislation is aware of the threats that could pose. And I don't know if we are in the right place. So that's something I'd like them to see the government look at going forward, is how we can actually make sure that people know how to spot fake audio or a fake video or a fake letter or something that's tweeted randomly and think that it's real.
No, I completely agree. I think one of the things that kind of was crazy to me is that you could write in like a synopsis for a film in something like ChatGPT or OpenAI, and they would just like write the script for like a 2-hour-long film. And it's so scary because that amount of power, and I also believe people don't know how to decipher these things. So it is definitely concerning for sure. I mean, Harvey, this has been just amazing to talk with you through everything. It's a true testament to cross-party collaboration already happening, and proportional representation isn't even on the map. Just the mere thought of proportional representation is creating collaboration. Just to finish off, I'd like you to look into the camera and just, speak to all the young people watching. What message as the chair of the Young Liberals do you have for anyone who believes that they are too young to get involved in politics?
I would say if you think that you're too young to be getting involved, or you're not sure how to get involved for the first time, I would say just go for it. Have a look at the different parties that are active in your area, have a look at the different campaign groups. You don't have to join a political party to get involved in something like Make Votes Matter or other campaign groups that are working on these sorts of issues. But you're never too young to learn things, you're never too young to learn about how things work, to go out there and understand what the issues are in your community and find ways of advocating for that. Maybe that's through the youth parliament, through a youth council, maybe it is through a political party, or maybe it's just through writing to your MP about the things that you see, the things that you want to change, and telling them what matters to you. That is the most important and powerful way that a young person can really make a difference in politics today.